Everyone laughed when the Chinese billionaire mocked the black waiter until he responded in perfect Chinese. The laughter was like a poison filling the air. It came from a table of 5 American businessmen and a Chinese woman named Leewi. She was pointing at the waiter, David, as if he were a funny object. "Look at that monkey serving our table," she said in Mandarin. "I bet he doesn't even know how to hold chopsticks properly. People like him should be cleaning toilets, not serving civilized people like us." The American men laughed nervously. They didn't understand what she said, but they knew they needed to impress this woman. Leewi Aerys controlled a $60 billion empire, and they wanted a piece of it. David, the waiter, kept pouring the wine. His face did not change. It was a face that had learned to hide all emotion. For 8 months he had swallowed insults like this. But this time something was different. In his eyes was a dangerous calm. It was the calm of a man who had been through much worse storms. Leewi was famous for her arrogance. She treated Americans like children and black people as if they were less than human. "That one probably didn't even finish high school," she continued in Mandarin. "In the United States, they think giving jobs to people like that is progress." What a joke. She didn't know that David understood every word, every insult, every comment. What she didn't know was that this monkey spoke fluent Mandarin. He had a master's degree in Asian studies from Harvard. He had spent 5 years working as a cultural attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. 8 months earlier, David was Dr. David Thompson. He was one of America's leading experts on U.S.-China relations. His life fell apart when he was falsely accused of leaking secrets to China. The doors to his world closed, even after he was proven innocent. No one wanted to hire a man who had been investigated by the FBI. So he took this job to survive. He became invisible, just another face in the crowd. "More wine," Leewi ordered in broken English. She made a point of not looking at him. Why would she look at someone she thought was inferior? But while everyone laughed, David was not angry. Not yet. He had a secret too powerful to show before the right time. Leewi was about to learn that underestimating a person based on their skin color is the biggest mistake a person can make. Over the next 40 minutes, Leewi turned the dinner into a show of racial insults. She was like a cruel child torturing a helpless animal. "This monkey must think he'll get a nice tip tonight," she said in Mandarin as David served the appetizer. In the United States, they think giving money solves the problem of racial inferiority. How naive. The American businessman laughed, but it was a weak laugh. Robert Hayes, the CEO of a large electronics company, tried to change the subject. But Leewi always brought the talk back to David. "You Americans are pathetic," she said, switching between Mandarin and English. "You think putting these people in real jobs is social progress, but just look at him. He can't even hold a tray without shaking." David wasn't shaking with fear. His hands shook with contained rage. Just 9 months ago, he had been at a dinner in Washington with the Chinese ambassador. They were discussing billion-dollar trade deals. At that time, Leewi was probably at a party in Shanghai, spending her father's money. His fall from grace had been brutal. David was the foremost American expert on Chinese business culture. His doctoral thesis on diplomatic protocols was required reading at universities all over the world. But his world was destroyed by a jealous colleague, Marcus Sterling. Marcus planted false documents that made it look like David was spying for China. The FBI investigation lasted 7 months. 7 months of public shame. Friends turned away. When he was finally cleared, it was too late. Marcus Sterling got the promotion that was meant for David. "Bring the bill," Leewi ordered in broken English. "And tell that little girl I'm Leewi from Way Industries. Maybe she's heard of my family on television." David almost choked. He knew that name. He had exchanged emails with her for 3 years. They coordinated visits for trade delegations. She had even praised his work, calling him the American who really understands our culture. Of course, she didn't recognize him. Back then, David wore expensive suits. He went to the same parties as her. Now, in a black waiter's uniform, he was invisible. Just another black worker to her. "The problem with Americans," she said in Mandarin, pointing at him, is that you think democracy means everyone is equal, but there are superior people and inferior people. It's the natural order of things. She went on to say horrible things about black families. Robert Hayes was clearly uncomfortable. Leewi, maybe we should focus on the contracts. No, no. She waved her jeweled hand. Let me finish my American sociology lesson. You need to understand who you're dealing with. David kept serving, his face like a mask. Inside, every word was a piece of evidence. Leewi didn't know she was digging her own grave. Every insult was a new shovel of dirt. Then she made a move that would change everything. She asked David to come closer. You, she said in English, as if calling a dog. What is your name? David, ma'am. David? She repeated, tasting the name as if it were bitter. Have you ever heard of China, David? Do you know where it is on the map? The American businessmen were frozen in their seats. The humiliation was too much. Yes, ma'am, David said calmly. How cute. He knows where China is. She laughed loudly, turning to the table and speaking in Mandarin again. I would bet my fortune that this monkey has never set foot outside New York. At that moment, David stopped. He looked into her eyes for the first time. It wasn't submission. It was recognition. A cold determination was building inside him. Every insult was a brick in a wall of silent strength. She was writing her own sentence of defeat, word by word, insult by insult. During a break, while Leewi continued her cruel show, David went to the employee bathroom. She was telling the businessmen that black people were inferior and survived on government help. In the bathroom, David pulled out his phone. He began typing a message that would change everything. The person he was texting was Dr. James Chun, his former mentor at Columbia University. Dr. Chun was a well-respected Chinese American and a powerful person in the city. The message was short and to the point. James, I need an urgent favor. I'm at the Jade Palace and just witnessed something that may interest the Chinese diplomatic community. Leewi from Wei Industries is here making extreme racist comments, thinking no one understands Mandarin. I have everything recorded. Can we meet tomorrow? The reply came in less than 2 minutes. My God, David, where have you been? Yes, let's meet. Leewi is under internal investigation in China for corruption and unethical behavior abroad. Her comments could be exactly what we need. David smiled for the first time in months. He had not told his mentor he was a waiter. Dr. Chun knew him as the brilliant diplomat he used to be. The plan was set. When David returned to the dining room, Leewi was at her worst. She was speaking in broken English, mocking accents she thought were beneath her. You know how to clear a table properly, she said to David. Or do you only know how to carry plates like a trained monkey? The businessmen were silent. I can clear the table perfectly, ma'am, David replied. His voice was calm. How cute, she laughed. He can speak properly. Maybe he's not as dumb as he looks. She turned to the businessmen. Did you see that? When you treat these people firmly, they learn how to behave. Then Leewi made the mistake that would seal her fate. She took out her phone and began recording a video. I'm here at the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan, showing how Americans educate their black workers, she said in Mandarin. Look how quiet he is when I speak with authority. David kept clearing the table. But inside, every second of that video was being saved as evidence. Leewi was documenting her own downfall. In China, she continued, we know that each race has its natural function. Black Americans are good for manual labor, but never for leadership or intelligence. It's basic biology. Robert Hayes stood up. Excuse me, I need to make a call. He walked away, followed by 2 other businessmen. The situation had gone too far. Leewi saw their leaving as a sign of her power. Did you see how it works? When you establish a clear hierarchy, even Americans understand, she said, still recording. This waiter here is a perfect example of how to maintain social order. He knows exactly where his place is in the world. Over the next 20 minutes, she built a complete case against herself. She made comments about Chinese racial superiority, insulted Black Americans, and created a whole philosophy about race. You give too many rights to people who should just serve, she said. That waiter, for example, probably thinks he deserves the same salary as educated people like us. That's when David took action. He took out his own phone and started recording her recording. A video within a video. He captured her words and the cruel look on her face. People like you, she said, pointing at him, should be grateful for having any job at all. She talked about a Chinese saying, "A dog that barks doesn't bite, but a dog that doesn't bark doesn't think either." David's face remained still, but in his mind he was compiling not just evidence but strategies. Every insult, every lie, every moment of arrogance was being saved for the future. Leewi didn't know that with every word, she was creating a diplomatic incident. "Tomorrow, I'm going to post this on my social media," she said. "My followers in China will find it hilarious to see how Americans allow these kinds of people to work in decent places." David smiled subtly. She was right. Someone would find the videos very interesting, but it would not be her followers. Leewi was on her third glass of champagne. She decided it was time for the final act. She looked at David. "You know what? I'm going to teach this monkey a lesson about social hierarchy." She turned to David and said in broken English, You know how to dance like a monkey? I want to see funny show." At that moment, David Thompson stopped. He stood up straight. For the first time all night, he smiled. It was a cold, calm smile. It made Robert Hayes choke on his wine. "Ms. Leewi," David said in perfect classical Mandarin. His pronunciation was flawless, more elegant than hers. "I believe you are confusing this establishment with a zoo." The silence in the restaurant was complete. Leewi was stunned. The words in fluent Mandarin from this monkey were like a physical blow. What did you say?" She stammered in English, all her arrogance gone. David continued in Mandarin. "It's interesting how some people confuse money with education, birth with character, and social status with human value." The American businessmen were speechless. Robert Hayes, who knew Chinese, recognized that David was a master. You speak Chinese?" Leewi whispered. "Classical Mandarin, modern Mandarin, Cantonese, and 3 regional dialects." David replied calmly, switching to English. "In addition to French and a little Japanese. But I imagine you noticed that from our last 90 minutes of conversation." The truth hit Leewi hard. He had understood everything. Every insult, every racist comment. "That's impossible," she stammered. "You're just a black American waiter." "I am a waiter," David said firmly. "But I am also Dr. David Thompson. I have a PhD in Asian Studies from Harvard. I specialize in U.S.-China relations and Chinese business culture." He let that sink in. "I worked for 5 years as a cultural attaché at the American Embassy in Beijing. I coordinated trade delegations between our countries and published 17 academic articles." Robert Hayes stood up, almost knocking over his chair. "My God, you're David Thompson. I read your thesis. You disappeared a year ago." Leewi felt the world spinning. "But why are you a waiter?" "Because sometimes life teaches us lessons in humility," David replied. "I was falsely accused of espionage. By the time I was cleared, the doors to my world were closed. So I took this job to survive. And for 8 months, people like you humiliated me every day, thinking I didn't understand." David pulled out his phone. "You made comments about my race, my intelligence, and about a natural hierarchy between peoples. You made an entire video explaining your theories about Chinese superiority and black inferiority." Leewi turned green. "You wouldn't dare. You didn't record all of it." "Of course I did," David smiled. "Every insult, every moment of racial arrogance. And since you were kind enough to record yourself, I have that too. In fact, Ms. Leewi," he continued, "we know each other professionally. I coordinated 3 conferences that your company participated in. You were present in 2 of them. Of course, I was wearing a suit and talking as an equal. It's understandable you didn't recognize me serving your table." Leewi couldn't speak. She had been completely exposed. The man she had humiliated was someone who had a hand in her company's success. David's voice grew stronger. You said people like me don't understand international politics. But I spent 3 years negotiating trade agreements that directly benefited Wei Industries. He added one more thing. It would be interesting to know what the Chinese Communist Party would think about a Chinese businesswoman promoting theories of racial superiority on American soil. Leewi finally found her voice. You can't. It would ruin me. I imagine so, David said gently, especially since China has strict policies about citizens who embarrass the country abroad. The restaurant manager, who had been watching, came to the table. Mr. Thompson, I didn't know your background. From now on, our policy will be very different. Thank you, David said. But this isn't about me. It's about how we treat people we think are different when we believe there are no consequences. Leewi tried one last time. Dr. Thompson, maybe we can make a deal. A deal? David smiled sadly. Ms. Leewi, for 8 months, dozens of people like you humiliated me. Every insult was catalogued. Every prejudice documented. The only thing I want now is for you to leave here knowing you were intellectually destroyed by a Black American man you considered trash. May that lesson stay with you for the rest of your life. Leewi stood up. Her legs were shaking. Her arrogance was replaced by pure panic. She knew her career was over. David remained calm and dignified. He proved that true strength comes from character, not from money. 3 months later, Leewi and David's lives were completely changed. Leewi woke up to a terrible headline. Billionaire Aerys loses $800 million in contracts after racist videos. The Chinese consulate had issued a statement against her words. Wei Industries lost 70% of its contracts in the U.S. in just 2 weeks. Her family suspended her executive privileges. The woman who arrived in New York as a queen was going home as a corporate outcast. Meanwhile, David Thompson was an international hero. The video of the confrontation went viral with over 50 million views. He became a symbol of dignity in the face of prejudice. Universities from 3 countries invited him to speak. The State Department offered him his old job back with a promotion and a 60% raise. It wasn't about revenge, David explained in an interview. It was about showing that human dignity is priceless, and that education can be found where we least expect it. He returned to diplomacy but kept 1 day a week at the Jade Palace. He became a senior advisor and a minority partner. The restaurant became a place for activists to visit. People from all over the world came to see the place where a waiter taught a billionaire a lesson in humility. The movement led to the creation of the David Thompson Protocol, a zero-tolerance policy against discrimination in businesses. Leewi made a public apology, but it only made things worse. Social media was merciless. Not unfortunate, racist, people wrote. She's only apologizing because she got caught. Privilege doesn't buy character. 6 months later, at a conference on corporate diversity, David ran into Robert Hayes. David, you taught us that underestimating people is the biggest business mistake there is, Hayes said. He shook David's hand with true respect. Leewi lived in seclusion in Shanghai. Her arrogance was replaced by social isolation. Her friends avoided her. Her reputation never recovered. It was the most expensive lesson a billionaire ever paid. Money cannot buy dignity, and prejudice always comes with a price. If the story about dignity and justice moved you, please leave a comment. How would you have reacted in David's place? By working together, we can circulate the idea that respect is a right. It is a fundamental human right.